The Philadelphia Inquirer on the front page had a big picture of now Pope Benedict XVI and about his election. And then on the bottom fold of the front page was a picture of us. When I was growing up, there was only one Pope, Pope John Paul II. He was the Pope when I was born. He was the Pope through my early years of life. And in fact, he had been Pope, I came to find out, for over 10 years before I was born. And so it just seemed like, there was only one, there was this figure called the Pope, and there was this one man named John Paul II who held that job, maybe forever, maybe for 2,000 years. Of course, as I grew up, I learned that that was not true, that he'd been elected to that position in 1978, and then like all the other ones, one way or another, his time as Pope on earth would come to an end. And so it did when I was a sophomore in high school. I remember this period in the church's life pretty vividly. In 2005, in the winter, John Paul II went from being a sort of a feeble old man to being someone that the news was talking about being near death. And I remember that sort of vividly. I was at Roman Catholic High School at the time as a sophomore. I had been working at my parish as a sacristan at the time. And so the church was on my mind. Parish priests in my life had already encouraged me to think about being a priest. And so that was in the back of my mind in a certain way, but I had a lot of other interests. And I certainly cannot say that, as a sophomore in high school that I was ready to enter the seminary or anything. But I remember vividly the experience of watching the services during Holy Week at the Vatican while the other cardinals were leading the services, and John Paul II was praying along with them by himself in his own private room, very, very sick, very, very frail and feeble. And remember on Easter Sunday that he came out to give his big speech, his Urbi et Orbi speech that the popes give every Christmas and Easter. And from the window of the Apostolic Palace, all he could really do was trace the sign of the cross over the people. He couldn't even get any words out. So people knew that he was getting close to the end of his life. And the following Saturday after that Easter Sunday, on the vigil of Divine Mercy Sunday, John Paul II died. And I remember being at home and sort of coming onto the news, breaking news that Pope John Paul II had died, that the Vatican had announced that. And I remember going over to church after that because I was a sacristan. I helped out in high school. And I remember the priest telling me to toll the bells, make sure that the bell system tolled, which is a traditional sign of mourning that the Pope had died. And so I remember doing all that, and I remember watching his funeral on TV and this amazing display of all these different people, cardinals and patriarchs and world leaders descending upon Rome for this man's funeral, who had been such an icon for so many years on the world stage. And then I remember being fascinated by the process of the conclave. I remember that the priest that was at my high school at the time lent me a book about how conclaves work. I remember reading through it and just being fascinated by all the imagery and the traditions and what would happen. And then when the cardinals entered the conclave that year in 2005, I remember I had seventh lunch that year. Imagine that Roman had lunch periods in third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. And I had seventh lunch, which of course is very late to have lunch, but I guess it was God's providence, because there we were, and we were watching the TV, and because they announced that there was white smoke, the Pope had been elected, and we were all standing there in the cafeteria at Roman, watching the sort of small TV that was up above the sort of head of the cafeteria there. The Inquirer, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the newspaper, the offices were just down the street from Roman at the time. So just in the flash of the activity, they must have dispatched a photographer to Roman just to get some shots of something to put in the paper the next day. And I don't remember this happening, but he was there taking pictures of us, watching as Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger was announced as Pope Benedict XVI, and all the fanfare and the excitement and announcements going on there. And then the next day, of course, the Philadelphia Inquirer on the front page had a big picture of now Pope Benedict XVI and about his election. And then on the bottom fold of the front page was a picture of us watching the conclave, watching the announcement being made in the cafeteria at Rome. And so there I was right there in the front with a bunch of friends of mine from 7th Lunch as we were watching that take place. So in a weird way, I sort of not just was physically present on the front of the newspaper in a photograph, but spiritually that experience of watching all that play out and showing the church as being ever ancient and ever new, right? With these ancient traditions and this line that goes back to Christ himself, who appointed St. Peter as the shepherd and the first among the apostolic band. And here we are, and yet ever new, because there we were, and there I was in 2005, watching that process, that tradition continue right there on TV. And that left a real mark on me in my own life, and I would say it was a very critical, ended up being a very important moment when I eventually was looking back and thinking about how did I get to the seminary. Certainly those weeks were a major part of it.